Yeah, so Eric is going to talk a little about drone regulations. Something that, especially as Mark was relating, right, in his introduction, being told by the Chancellor Office that you're the first college in California to offer a drone class. When we brought that up to like our administrators like, well, aren't there regulations about that? And then we just basically got shoved around to different offices. Like, here, talk to the contracts people. And then the contracts people was going to go talk to the insurance people. And then the insurance people went to talk to the FAA, and the FAA didn't know what to do with us. So we went through like the certificate of authorization, and then they're like, oh, and then they changed the regulations. And so it's nice to have someone, right, actually on campus that kind of manage the risk management and approve, right, the different operations of drones for research or teaching purposes. And I think that's a lot of what Eric does at UCSD.
Down for time.
Oh, but
is it up right now?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect.
So that's the online
Nice.
one.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Nice to meet you. Bye.
I don't. So I'm going to let Eric talk, and then.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Mark, as well, for the water. I don't know about you, but I'd love to have a beer with Todd someday. I'm sure he's got some great stories. I would love to hear about the early days as well. So thank you again for having me today. I'm just going to go over, like he said, the regulatory landscape, and I'm going to start off with a question. It depends, this is relative to where you're at in your craft, but do you feel it's easier nowadays to fly a drone, or it's harder? If you feel it's easier, raise your hand. Okay, if you think it's harder, raise your hand. Wow, I didn't expect it to be so varied. All right, so hopefully today my goal is to make it at least easier for you to understand some of the obstacles and the regulations of being a pilot for small UASs and so forth, or drones. I'll be using that word interchangeably. So who am I? Somebody said he manages all the airspace over the UCSD campus, and he gives permission for people to fly, and that's basically sums up what I do. We have researchers, we have construction contractors coming on campus, we have students, and we have faculty who want to fly drones. And a lot of times they come with great ideas and great flight plans, and they have to be modified for risk purposes and so forth. So I'm sort of the middleman. I keep on top of the FAA regulations, the state, the city policies, and also the UC system. I'm sort of controlled by them. I work closely with Brandon Stark. Does anybody know Brandon Stark at all? All right, amazing guy. He gives us a lot of guidance as well at the universities, and he forms the policy for the UC system. So I also have a drone for our department. We have 2 drones. I fly them. I'm a first responder, a duty officer, so we have one now for emergency response, and we have other ones for inspections and other cool projects, air monitoring, and it's taking off. So I think this is the best analogy or metaphor I can find for how most of us feel with the FAA. It's sort of an abstract painting of dots and waypoints, and we're trying to connect them and make sense of it. Meanwhile, the FAA, they sort of have this abstract picture of lines and point A to point B. But really, it's very difficult to understand what we can do and what we can't do. And after listening to Todd, it seems like he could do a lot of things out there that most of us will never do, flying high and flying in near the Anacapa Islands and all those places. So he's very fortunate. Disregard what he said earlier, because I'm going to talk about what you can't do today. So this is sort of the milestones for drones, where we've gone so far with the FAA and the federal government. And really, the only thing I want you to look at with is the 2017 change, May 19th. Hobbyists don't have to register their drones anymore. Don't get too excited about that. I think that's just a stalling pattern right now as the FAA develops its unmanned air system and so forth. But it's been a sort of roller coaster, and it will continue to be, and there'll be a lot more milestones to come in the next few months. So at least we have an anchor of rules, a set of rules, more or less, that we should follow. I hope you all know the rules. You can't fly over people for the most part right now. As far as I know, I think there might be a film production crew that can or has, but as far as I know, does anybody, wait, Jeff, do they have any exemptions to fly over people?
Yeah.
Right now?
Only a few of them.
One film crew, I think, or 2. Last time Brandon spoke, there was none. But
Aerial Mob's a local company, and they have
Yeah, so you can't go over 400 feet for the most part, and you can't interfere with any other aircraft, as well as maintain visual line of sight. You have to fly sober. So I hope if you're flying your drone, you're following all of these, unless you have special exemptions for Part 107, which I will mention and talk about. Okay, so for the simplicity of users, Todd's not included in this. There's two types of users. There's recreational users, and there's Part 107 commercial operators. And the way I sort of define them very simply is there's people who fly for fun or education, and there's people who fly for money. How many of you fly for money? How many of you have commercial operators license, pilot license? Okay, so awesome. So you fall under there, but sometimes you play in there, and some of these areas can get gray. I'll talk about some specific cases that I've seen at the university. So we all love Greek life. They wanted to fly a drone, supposedly, and they wanted to make a cool promotional video to get more freshmen to be part of their sorority. Does anybody know what they fall under if they do that? Commercial or recreation? Commercial? Recreation? All right, so yeah, you're right, it is commercial, because to join a fraternity or a sorority, you gotta pay money, right? And if you're recruiting, you're promoting your club, you have to do it. Here we have a dual use case. A professor wants to start a drone class, and they want to make drones in their classes, and they want to fly drone students. So if they're students, they want to fly for education, then they fall under the section 336. The professor, if he's taking a drone and showing one that was made for the class, he falls under Part 107, and he has to have a license. Here we have a researcher that was doing coastal surveys, erosion surveys, and he has a grant, and he's being paid to fly. So he falls under commercial. I'm sure many of you know where this is going. But here we go. Here's a little gray area, and this sort of kind of fell into our own department. You get a drone, you get a nice drone for your department, and you want to fly it. You've never flown it before, right? And you want to test it out. And you want to take it out. If you're testing it out to train yourself to be proficient for your job, then you fall under commercial. But if you're just taking it out and your director or your manager is cool and is like, yeah, go fly it for fun, then you fall under that. So there's some like gray areas that occur here, but to be safe, you should get a pilot's license if you're doing that. All right, so if you've taken the remote pilot test, you've seen that there's certain hazardous attitudes that you could have as pilots. In my course of approving flight requests and interfacing with different pilots, I broke it down into 4 archetypes that I've seen come across. And one, we have the terrified user. They just get a drone. This happens with students. They don't want to fly over water. It's going to go down. They look at the air map. They see all these yellow circles. They freak out. They're pretty sort of paralyzed before they fly. And these are my favorite. These are the researchers. They're cautious. They ask questions. They are very process-oriented. They have their flight operations manuals. They don't do anything first without thinking of the consequences. I hope all of you are that way. And then these are the old guys, the crusty guys. They come across, they've been flying fixed wings before, they've been flying drones since 2002, and they're gonna do whatever they want. And sometimes they break the rules, sometimes they don't. But they're challenging to deal with, but they're fun, they've got good stories. And then we have, for better or worse, we have the reckless ones, which end up creating more regulations for us and more issues. And it sometimes comes from ignorance, comes from youth, and a whole host of things. But we have some local cases that we've seen on this spectrum. Is we've seen from the reckless users, we've seen that the Petco Park, there was a drone that flew in, and that created a lot of issues for the police department. Luckily, the city council passed some rules, so they were able to go after the operator and actually fine him. I think it's $1,500 he's going to end up paying. How much? $1,400.
Exactly.
Oh, wow, okay. The last time I looked, I wasn't sure of the fine. That's a lot. That, you don't want to be that guy. You don't want to be that meme.
And he also lost a $1,200 drone.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and not good. So then you know the fire over here, so if you live locally at the golf course at Oceanside, another operator got in the way of the fire suppression, and I don't know what the investigation is. Anybody know what happened with that? I was looking for that. I couldn't find anything on that. So we have a lot of reckless people in San Diego, and this is an opportunity for you not to be that person. I live in Pacific Beach. I saw somebody drinking a beer and flying over me. They followed me with my bike, and then they were going into a window, and they were beyond visual line of sight. I almost turned back and was going to lecture them, but I figured I'm just going home. All right, so let's get into sort of the more of the regulatory side and get a little more detailed oriented here with what's going on. The current setting is this. You look at a map and you see a lot of controlled airspace in San Diego, a lot of places that are difficult to fly. And not only, this doesn't really depict all the areas you can't fly. There are more areas you can't fly, and I want to talk about that as we go further into this presentation. So the challenge for recreational flyers right now, all of us could agree with this, is finding a place to fly. You may live right near where you live and you want to fly your drone and you end up having to drive 10 miles out to be able to drive. You can do it in controlled airspace by calling air traffic control, but sometimes that can be a problem. Has anybody tried doing that in here? And with good results? No. They take your name, they want to know your registration number, they say you can't, and then they hang up on you or something. I've heard that's happened to people. Or you call a helipad, you're like, okay, I want to be a good pilot. I'm going to call the helipad. They're like, I'm transferring you. We don't know what drone, what? So there's a lot of issues right now if you're trying to fly. Sifting through rumors and misinformation, the DJI forums are saying that you can't fly at night as a recreational pilot, which is untrue. You can fly at night as long as you have lighting that's 3 nautical miles and so forth. Dealing with the stigma of nuisance and privacy break, a lot of people don't like drones. They're kind of like smartphones back in the day. Oh, those things are awful, they're terrible. They're invasion of privacy, they're loud. So it's very challenging for recreational flyers. So the National Park Service is the ideal place that you want to fly. And the National Park Service has a moratorium as well as the California state parks. And unless you're doing research and you're filing for permits, then you cannot go in there and fly your drones. And these to me are the ideal, safest places to fly.
I've kind of heard like a myth. Are you able to technically fly off, or take off?
Correct.
Outside?
You can go outside. You can go outside as long as you're not in the property. Correct.
In the property?
Yeah. So like the glider port, for instance, is one of those areas you're not allowed to fly, but you could technically bring your drone if you're on the sidewalk and fly. Again, there's a lot of gray areas, but then fishing, I'll talk a little more about some fines that have happened. You can, if you're disturbing wildlife, they could still possibly go after you. Again, a lot of this isn't very black and white. So the challenges for commercial pilots are interpreting all the emerging federal, state, and city regulations. They're changing constantly, especially the city regulations and federal regulations. So that's very difficult. Filing COAs and getting the COAs. Who's filed a COA? Who's gone through the entire process? All right, good. Raise your hand if you got it. Okay, cool. All right, that's good. That's good. When they started off, the biggest challenge was getting them. So most exemptions right now for Part 107s that people are seeking are in the daylight operations, so they can fly at night for commercial pilots. They could fly in certain airspaces, Charlie, Bravo, Delta. Those airspaces are what people are trying to fly in, especially real estate agents and other people trying to get or do roofing inspections. A COA is nothing sexy. There's nothing sexy about it. It really is just a black and white document that is a standard operating procedures, and it tells you how to conduct your flight operations under these exemptions. And they all vary depending on the type of flight you're doing. It's very confusing when you go to the FAA website to understand what a COA is. There are about 5 of them, and under each of them, it stands for Certificate of Waiver of Authorization. There's the Section 333, the Public Agency Operation Waiver. There's the Airspace Authorization. And then there's the ECOAs, which are now called the SGI, Special Governmental Interest. And they're being approved within 2 hours roughly. They expire at certain times. It just depends when you get one. And they are becoming a little more difficult to get these days. If you want to get the Section 333 or the PAO one, you have to go through a portal access. If you download this presentation, I give you the contact in the FAA who you can reach out to get into the portal. But for the most part, you can go to this link and request them through there. So I don't want to go. This could be a whole clinic on COAs. And we have the UC system. They provide us a person who manages and does all of them. It's good to have one person do them all. So filing a COAs is a lot like a black box. When they first started creating this process, there was about a 10% approval rate in 2016. It's gotten better and easier, but it's slowed down a little bit in some ways because the FAA is currently working on the extension of Safety and Security Act. So if you have a waiver right now, we have a few waivers for the UC system, and they're being extended to June 2018. Attorneys are doing them. They're filing them for about $500 to $15,000 roughly. That number could be anything. But if you don't have a dedicated team to file a COA, it could be a lot of work on your end, and it's nice to have somebody do it for you. University of California has 37 waivers right now, airspace waivers, and we have about, 3 at San Diego, 3 that are active, and we have 11 pending. 1 just got approved, and 1 just got denied. And so what I say, if you're going to file an airspace authorization or an airspace waiver, you should do both, because they may reject the waiver, but they'll give you the airspace authorization. And so the FAA just created this map site. It's called the UAS Facility Map data. And this is a great resource. They haven't really gotten down to San Diego yet. But if you're going to fly in this Class C airspace right here, and you want to fly and request a COA, you can look and see the altitudes, the permittable altitudes that they're giving you right now. And you should definitely get onto the site. If you download the presentation, the link's in there as well. And you can make these COAs and kind of know what's going on. So really what's happening in the regulatory world right now that's good to know and bad for us is that there's a fight between the state, city, and federal agencies right now for airspace. It's sort of a battle, a turf war, if you will. Sort of similar to is it the marijuana one, the 64? The states were asking for more rights and freedoms to have recreational marijuana. But the thing is, it's with drones. California wants to they want to preempt some of the FAA rules to make stricter regulations, in Utah as well. So the FAA and the federal government are having battles right now with the states, and we're kind of at a point where we don't know how that's going to play out. The Bard University is a very good map that I highly recommend you check out. They will show you some of these battles and what's happening. And I wanted to show in Aventura that if you took a photo of a building or a group of people, you'd get fined $500 by the Aventura police. But July 5th, a few days ago, the state of Florida said you cannot make up your own laws, your own city laws and ordinances with drones. Utah allows officials to jam a drone interfering with fire or emergency services. They were trying to pass a bill so the police officers can shoot down a drone. Montana, they just shot at the drone at the Black Rock protest site. And so obviously you can see there's a lot of problems with that if you think about Chicago recently with 100 shootings that happened from random bullets, 4th of July. We'll talk about the current FAA efforts right now. I would not want to be in the FAA shoes. They're doing great work with limited resources, and they have a lot of pressure from a lot of angles. But the one thing they want to do is they want to create that air system that all drones communicate with each other. They communicate with planes, helicopters, and it gives more accountability to the operators. So if an incident happens, they can track and say, okay, that's from John Smith. He's right there. Let's talk to him and let's investigate what's going on. So this is big pressure, and this is due to the FAA's Safety Security Extension Act of 2016. They're getting a lot of pressure to roll this out. They're trying to also find counter technology, UAS technology. So airports, they can create detection systems. They can also bring down drones if necessary. That might be a threat. They want to have, when you buy a drone, that you get the rules from the FAA. I don't know about you when you got your drones, but there was no notice of FAA. Most likely it came from China, and it was just little small directions. So they want to have that. They want to have a fine for getting in the way of emergency fire. There's a drone committee. They're meeting and talking with a great bunch of minds. There are about 40 or so people from all over all these industries, and they're trying to help them as well. The current legislative efforts, and this is important, so pay attention here, what's coming at you. There's the Drone Privacy and Transparency Act of 2017. They want drone operators to be registered in a database, so it's kind of like what I do at the university, I guess, more or less, where you're going to say, I'm flying at this place at this time, my name is this, here's my address, here's my phone, this is the data I'm collecting. And so if you own a house and you see a drone and you're like, that drone has been photographing me or videotaping me, then the person can petition and say, I want to know what happened, what were you collecting, and it could create a lot of legal battles and so forth. That's just sort of the summary of it. I'm not really getting into the detail of these acts. These are in the Senate, and they're bills that are trying to move forward. You have the Drone Federalism Act, which is basically saying you can't fly over private property for 200 AGL or within that area. So that can create, again, more issues for flying drones. There's a lot of private property around us. And then the Safe Drone Act of 2017 is looking to create innovation, jobs, workforce, and trying to kind of stay relevant with other countries because our drone technology, our innovations in this country are taking off, but our regulatory side is keeping us back. So this is trying to help that. And then California is kind of creating similar laws to the FAA, but they want to fine people $1,000, and they want to add a little bit more restrictions and some privacy measures as well. And then they want people to be certified to be able to do pest control as well. So these are coming. And the White House as well wants to be able to hack a drone, take a drone, and so you can't fight in court and recover it and so forth. And so there's all these little proposals coming out of there. The most important thing is that they want to privatize the air traffic control. So that would create fees for users of UASs. So there's a lot of things cooking in the cauldron. And the current study that I found that's really good was about UASs, how they're affecting wildlife, and even small UAS, how it can be a threat to wildlife. So that might influence legislation as well, depending on the political climate and where you live. So should you be terrified now to fly your drone? No, you shouldn't. All you need to do is really keep calm, drone on, read these bills, get involved, and write your legislators if you see concerns that might affect you. So another part of the regulatory side is insurance. I don't think this is really mentioned a lot, how important insurance is, but when I do the flight request, insurance is a huge part of it. We look and make sure that people have insurance. Well, luckily right now, recreational users, students don't need insurance, but we usually push them into the Academy of Model Aeronautics or the AVUSI or some kind of group that will give them coverage, because if you're flying recreationally, a drone could fall from the sky, hit somebody or damage somebody's car, and you're going to be liable for it. So commercially, we usually ask for a $1 million policy if they want to fly on the campus. We say we need an aviation, not a general liability policy. And you could do that by going to many sites now. Insurance companies are giving it easily. Verify's nice. They'll give you an hour policy, but it's a little bit pricey for what they do. The fines, if you get insurance, you're not off the hook for paying fines. You still are responsible, so you have to be careful. The $200,000 fine to Skypan, I think that was the largest fine so far that was doled out. The National Park Service and the Fish and Game Society have been going after YouTubers. They're like trolls now. They find who the person is, they find out which parks they're flying their drones and taking off in, and they're going after them and sending them these fines. And the YouTubers are on there, bloggers, they're complaining about being caught, even though they were kind of foolish in some ways. And the San Diego Police Department now has the right to fine people too for unsafe use as well. So best way, ask yourself, is it legal to fly here? And if you can't be 100% sure, keep asking. So I want to talk about the lessons that I've learned in my role and some of the gray areas that I've kind of come across in this role. So this is not the Dalai Lama saying this, be humble and gracious, but our director right here, Dan Goff, was at the Dalai Lama commencement and the graduation ceremony. A guy was flying the drone with the Chancellor's office, the department, and we didn't give an authorized flight for that, and he caught him. Luckily, the seagulls were attacking it, and he had to bring the drone down. And he was very humble and gracious, and instead of getting into it with him, he said, look, I'm going to give you one more flight path. You can come up and come down. Instead of confiscating his drone or really getting into it with him, they worked out an agreeable relationship. And I think that's the whole thing in whether you're doing recreational or commercial. These relationships matter with everyone you work with. And for me, because I have to authorize flight, I'm sort of the administrative, I'm the pain for researchers sometimes or students, is that you come from a position of service rather than authority. I notice that works better because then people won't do illegal flights. They'll come to you, they'll ask questions, and you can work with them. So I don't say no. Well, never say no. I try to say, yes, we can make this happen, but we need to do this. Tell your neighbors if you're flying, even if you're flying recreational in your neighborhood, there's nothing wrong with saying, hey, I'm going to fly this drone for about an hour. I'm going to take a video of my kid. Or if you're doing commercial, send a little flyer out. I send notices to the residence halls, and I get great feedback from people. They're like, thank you for letting us know. So be a good neighbor. Feedback improves your processes. If you have a flight operations manual, you have a business process, a flight plan, or a new technology, share it with others and be open to feedback, because feedback makes you a better pilot. And helipads are hellish. I don't know if it's really the process of dealing with them, calling, notifying has been very difficult. Have a media statement ready. You just never know when you're going to be on the news. even a recreational pilot. I'm a first responder at the campus, a duty officer, and we practice in training our media statement, what to say, and you just never know. If you don't have a good communication strategy, it's not a part of your flight operations manual. It should be, because you do not want to get caught on the spot and be that guy in the news or be a meme for the rest of your life. San Diego is growing, and it's growing exponentially, our campuses, and I'll say, yeah, you're authorized to fly at this location, and then I'll say, wait a second, before I send that email, I'm going to drive out there, I'm going to look, and I notice there's 6 cranes, they're at 200 feet or 100 feet, and I have to make changes to the flight request. So always do reconnaissance. Even if you fly recreational at a certain spot, places change all the time, and you want to know your environment and your landscape. Okay, so we have this airspace. It's a sliver just east of campus that we're trying to get authorization for, and we did a COA, and the FAA sent it to Montgomery, they sent it to San Diego, they sent it to Miramar, and nobody was saying, that's not we don't have an air traffic controller, that's not us. So now it's at the Department of Defense. This was really a confusing process, and so sometimes airspace isn't always clear. Politics are tricky. There was this chancellor's project. They wanted to fly a drone and make a bunch of money from alumni so they can donate and grow the campus. And they came at us with all these flight requests and plans, and I worked with them over the phone, and they didn't follow the plans. And they did some things that were definitely suspect and also reputationally questionable, because they are representing the university, they're representing themselves, and there were some safety issues that came up. But politics are tricky. I wanted to go after and be like, hey, you didn't. But instead, I look at it as an opportunity. If we work with them again, we can mention, hey, you know, we want our reputation to look good. Not only you, but us. And we'd like to work closer with you next time so we don't have these issues. So you could see a few like Part 107 violations here. The glider port. But it's a really cool video. It's beautiful. That area is all restricted because of the gliders. And I'm flying through the building, I said, don't go near the building, it's 50 feet, come on. It's cool though, I would have done it too. And then over surfers, yeah, so, but it's a beautiful video, and they got a lot of money, so. We have territorial creatures in our university, and even within our own departments, people are trying to silo airspace. And one group wanted to keep drones out of the scripts for Coastal Reserve. I was scared because then I was worried that maybe they'll want to do it on the recreation fields. And so, again, it came back to relationships matter. And what I want to do in the future is I want to bring these people in a committee and discuss these things rather than saying no or yes and so forth. So you have to work with neighbors and people that you want to just kind of steamroll. The future is bright. I'm almost done here. I think hydrogen drones are coming that are going to stay up longer, also pose new challenges. There's a lot of jobs. There's a lot of regulatory positions that are going to become available to manage this. There's going to be more restrictions, and there's going to be more traffic management. Imagine if the 5 or 15 didn't have any cops or any laws. You know, it'd be pretty crazy, right? So these are good things, not necessarily bad. There's more drone races coming. We have one on campus in October, a big one that we're coordinating with. And I think the neatest thing that I've seen is NVIDIA has these no pilot GPS drones that are going out, and they're basically doing deep algorithms, deep learning to find people in the woods, and they can stay up for a while rather than having a pilot. So there's just some amazing things coming, and if you're in it right now and you're passionate, you're in a good place. So I hope you're following some news sources and you're getting feeds in your emails, you're getting blasted, because that's important to keep up with everything, and that's what I'm part of these. There's some newsletters I put in here that I highly recommend you check out. Even if you've been flying for years, there's good information from insurance to Part 107 information. And the presentation, again, I'll show you how you can get it. How many of you are part of the AVUSI? Good. AMA? AOPA in the house? No? Okay, good. All right, got a few. So if you're here, you should join one of these. You should join one of these, because you're already showing that you've made a commitment to be involved, and you'll network, you'll possibly get to fly new drones, you'll meet the right people and so forth. I already met 2 great people just being here, and these agencies, these groups will get you to meet more people. Thank you again, Professor Chung, for everything. Thank you for coming out, for being passionate. And if you want this presentation right there, call me anytime or email me anytime if you have any questions. If you want to come to campus and have a coffee, please feel free. Thank you.